talk about that and so much more with regard to the UK possibly leaving the EU. Europolitics' Brian Beary joining me now. He is the Washington-based correspondent for the Brussels-based European Affairs newspaper. So you must be writing a lot about this these days.
We're following it closely. It has come in the last 2 years or so, so we've had some notice, but it definitely is a very big story for us.
So, question is, the UK just spent all of this time, all of this effort trying to keep Scotland part of the UK. Why go the other direction and splinter from the EU, or even contemplate it?
Well, Britain has had a decades-long difficult relationship with the European Union. It has agonized over joining it. Once it was in, it wondered, should it stay in? And then 2 years ago, the Prime Minister, David Cameron, hoping he would calm down his anti-EU wing in the party, said he would call a referendum if he got back into government. He may be regretting he said that, because it has created its own momentum, and now it is the dominant narrative in the country.
But as we just heard in Richard Bestick's reporting, this could have an enormous economic impact on the people of the UK, up to a 2% effect on GDP. What do you think? Why so high?
Well, Britain, after 40 years of membership of the EU, has integrated into its economy. In a sense, it is a success story, and 500 million people in the European Union, full access to the single market. If Britain leaves, what will happen to its access to that market? There's a lot of unanswered questions. Those in favor of leaving say it will free up Britain from a lot of the bureaucratic rules from Brussels. But those against it say, well, once you're on the outside, you're in a weaker position and you lose access to the market, and you're always negotiating from a weaker position. And so that figure that came out was sort of the worst case scenario, but really it's all guesswork. No one really knows.
Of course, the UK is an entry point for a lot of multinationals into the EU. They'd rather be based in the UK. What would be the impact on foreign direct investment in the UK, in your estimation, and just multinationals accessing the EU in that way?
I think a lot of multinationals would much rather that Britain stay in the European Union, because it is a gateway to a market of 500 million people. Yeah. At the same time, Britain has, regardless of whether it's in the EU or not, it has the City of London and the financial services sector, which is a huge chunk of the British economy. And personally, I don't see that going away regardless of whether Britain is in or out of the EU. But it is true that the business community in general, both in Britain and outside of Britain, tends to be more in favor of Britain remaining inside the EU.
And what sectors of the economy would be most impacted by a decision like this?
Possibly trade in goods and products, because there's no guarantee that Britain would have tariff-free access to the market, would have to negotiate a separate trade deal. If you look at other examples, Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, they're not in the EU. They got access to the market, but the price they have to pay is they have to apply almost every single EU law anyway. They just have no say in how the laws are written. So some would say, well, that's not a great deal. If Britain gets access to the market, but it no longer has any chance to write the rules, is that such a good deal?
What about Greece? Obviously, that's the problem child of the Eurozone now. What do you think that they would read into it? Would it affect that situation at all, send a message?
I don't think so, because I think Greek people have totally different issues with the EU. Greeks are very supportive of EU membership. They even want Eurozone membership. Even the Tsipras, the new prime minister, is trying to keep Greece inside the Eurozone. They just hate austerity. Whereas the British have, as I mentioned, a decades-long agonized relationship with the European Union that really transcends any kind of issues that Greece has.
All right, Brian Beary, thanks so much for coming in and giving us your thoughts on that. We appreciate it.